This one is about Bernie Sanders. Now, I had already planned to talk about Bernie Sanders' interview that he had on CNN. And one of the topics that we are going to discuss is the defense budget, which Bernie did discuss. And it just so happened that literally right before I was about to go live, speaking of defense budget, something else happened in reference to Bernie Sanders. And I don't think you're going to like what I'm going to tell you if you have not seen that yet, but we're going to discuss it here because I do want to make a comparison. So let's go ahead and get into the first clip here. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. The first portion of this interview is discussing this plan that Joe Biden has to make South Carolina one of the early primary voting states. Bernie Sanders was interviewed about that strategy. So let's hear how Bernie Sanders feels about this. And I have some things to say because, you know, South Carolina was incredibly important in reference to defining the race between him and we may as well just say just him and Joe Biden at that point. So let's go ahead and get into it.
Before I let you go, I want to ask about Iowa and New Hampshire. You're familiar with those states. You've been there many, many times in your presidential runs. They've always, at least in recent history, gone first in the primary calendar. But now Democrats are trying to move South Carolina first in the nominating calendar, a state I should note that you were beaten in twice. Would South Carolina first in the process be the right thing to do for Democrats?
Notice how she had to add in, you were beaten twice in South Carolina.
Well, this is a very much, Dana, inside the Beltway Democratic Party issue. And a committee has made a recommendation. I'm sure it's going to be debated a whole lot. I'm sure there are 50 states that want to go first. We will see what's happening. But my focus right now is trying to do what I can to make sure that Congress deals with many of the major issues facing working families. And that's what I'll be focusing on.
Before I let you go, I want to ask.
Notice he didn't really answer that question. And I have a theory about that. First and foremost, we need to talk about why are they trying to make South Carolina that first state? Let's remember that was the state that really changed the race for Joe Biden. He went on to win in South Carolina, and then he went on to win the whole shebang. So that's one factor. The other factor is there's more African-American votes to be acquired in South Carolina than there is in Iowa or New Hampshire. That's just a reality. The numbers don't lie. But what kind of Democratic voters are typically in South Carolina? Well, I went to college there, so I happen to know a lot. And I worked there for a couple of years after I graduated college. And from my experience, most of the Democrat voters in South Carolina tend to be more moderate Democrats, which would be the type that Joe Biden is going to be looking for. You notice they're not trying to make one of the first states California. They're not trying to make one of the first states Washington State or Oregon. There's a reason for that. There's more progressive voters in those states. They're not trying to make my state of Massachusetts one of the first states either. But you notice Bernie Sanders didn't really answer that question. And you have to ask yourself why. How does he feel about South Carolina becoming the first early primary voting state? He didn't really give an opinion. And this has to be somewhat painful for Bernie Sanders because, like I said, it was that state that changed the race between him and Joe Biden. That turned everything around after he had won Nevada, after he had won New Hampshire. Later on, we came to find out that technically he did win Iowa as well. That changed everything. And Bernie Sanders doesn't have a comment about it becoming the first primary state. This is Bernie Sanders once again trying to carry water for the establishment, trying to protect the Democratic Party. Now, I'm sure Bernie Sanders may not be keen on this, but is he going to say that on CNN? No. No. He knows better than to speak against Joe Biden. We're going to get into him not speaking against Joe Biden in just a second as well. So you have to ask yourself, why on earth would Bernie Sanders even hint at possibly running again for 2024 if he is not willing to push back on the very same establishment that he told all of us to push back on? And you also have to ask yourself, at this point in time, what is the purpose of having Bernie Sanders in the Senate as someone who is supposed to be a progressive, fighting for progressive policies and fighting for working class and poor people? At this point in time, what is the point? What is the purpose? My belief is that the purpose is to get Bernie Sanders to continue to funnel younger people, energize younger people who want change, who are passionate about climate change, to energize that base again and to keep them in the two-party system. And if you don't believe me, well, then you should ask yourself, why didn't Bernie Sanders take all of that energy that he had with the progressive movement? And we had the numbers. Why didn't he take that energy and start a third-party movement? Because at the end of the day, even Bernie Sanders doesn't want to break up the duopoly. You have to understand that. I have to make this very clear. At the end of the day, even though Bernie Sanders is a registered independent, he is not trying to disrupt the duopoly. He wants a little bit of forms here and there. He believes he can do this through the Democratic Party or push people left. How's that working out? But when it comes to complete change, when it comes to a complete overhaul of this system, Bernie Sanders is not actually trying to change the system. Not really, if you look at it. He believes that by operating in the duopoly as a progressive, you can bring about these reforms. But after everything that you've seen over the past couple of years, whether it was Bernie Sanders or whether it was the squad, why would Bernie Sanders still believe that at this point? And you also have to ask the question, at this point in his career, why would Bernie Sanders still carry water and cover for the establishment? Bernie Sanders can retire right now if he wants to. He's not choosing to do that. At this point, he could throw everybody under the bus and just leave. But he's still not willing to do that. Now, there's another part of this interview about the defense budget. I want you to hear what Bernie Sanders has to say about the defense budget that they just voted on, by the way, to give the military industrial complex more money. Listen to what he says.
The record-breaking $858 billion defense funding bill. The House passed that this week. The Senate is going to vote on it. You voted against the NDAA, the defense bill, last time around. Will you do so again?
Yes, I think I will. Look, we have 85 million Americans who have no health insurance.
Notice what he just said. Pay close attention to it.
Voted against the NDAA, the defense bill, last time around. Will you do so again?
Yes, I think I will.
He thinks he will. Shouldn't you know? If you're the progressive, what's there to think about? We don't need to give the military industrial complex any more money. We need to give money to the American people. We need to get everybody health care in this country. Over $800 billion going to the MIC. But Joe Biden will tell you we can't have Medicare for all because we can't afford it. But Bernie Sanders thinks he will. Let's go on.
Look, we have 85 million Americans who have no health insurance. We have 600,000 people who are homeless. We have a dysfunctional healthcare system, dysfunctional childcare system where working parents are paying $15,000 a year on average for childcare. We have got to start protecting the needs of working families. The Pentagon is the one major agency of government which has never been independently audited. There is massive waste and fraud and cost overruns within that agency. So I think we can have the strong defense that we need without spending the huge amount of money that we're currently spending on the military.
I want to.
Now, remember what he just said. So he called out the Pentagon for basically being corrupt. This is true. But you know what Bernie Sanders says and what he does are two different things. Because after this clip, I'm going to show you what he just did. And it's not in regards to the defense budget, but it is in regard to the MIC. So pay attention to that. Pay attention to this.
But I would tell you, Dana, I look forward very much to becoming chairman of the Health Education Labor Committee. And I want to tell you that in that job, I intend to do everything I can to lower the outrageously high cost of prescription drugs in this country. And we're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. We're going to take on the insurance industry.
When I've been hearing Bernie Sanders say this for years. When are they going to do that? How are they going to do that? Because he's not explaining that either. They sure as hell aren't passing any legislation to do that, especially now that the Republicans will have control of the House come January. How? When? Shouldn't you be trying to do everything that you can right now before Republicans get control of the House in January? If you're really trying to do those things, you're going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. How? Where was the force to vote for Medicare for all from the progressive politicians? Strategy straight from the DSA handbook, but you're going to take on the pharmaceutical company. Doesn't tell you how, though. How are you going to take on this corruption and this corporate greed when you continue to support the very same corporate corrupt politicians in your own party? Is Joe Biden going to let you take on the pharmaceutical industry, knowing that he takes money from Big Pharma? That's Bernie Sanders' good friend. Is he going to let that happen? He going to let you do that, Bernie? You think Bernie Sanders is going to push back on Joe Biden? If you do, you'd be wrong. And I'm going to prove that point in just a second. Let's go on.
And try to end the situation where we are the only major country on earth that doesn't guarantee health care to all people. I remain very concerned, as I said, about child care. I believe that child care in this country should not only be affordable, it should be universal. We got to deal with student debt. There are enormous crises facing working families, and I hope that the United States Congress, perhaps in some instances in a bipartisan way, will have the courage to take on the billionaire class who are doing phenomenally well. Corporations enjoying record-breaking profits.
Why would Bernie Sanders have hope that a bipartisan House is going to be willing to take on billionaires when a lot of them are taking billionaire money? Most of them take corporate money. So why would Bernie Sanders think that they would actually do that? We couldn't even get the few squad members to force the vote for Medicare for all. We couldn't even get the few squad members to not supporting funding the police. We couldn't even get the few squad members to not support the Iron Dome. So why would Bernie Sanders think that all of a sudden all these corporate politicians are going to be on board with pushing back against the billionaire class? Somebody please explain that to me. Why is he misleading the people here? Why is he doing this? What kind of gaslighting BS is this, man? How could you say this to people, Bernie? How could you really get people's hopes up like this? You know damn well those politicians are not going to push back on corporations. They are not going to dismiss corporate interests. And the audacity of him to sit here and even give the American people some type of hope that that would even be possible. It is appalling to me. Absolutely appalling. Let's finish up.
Billionaire class who are doing phenomenally well. Corporations enjoying record-breaking profits while working people fall further and further behind. So to my mind, the issue is, will we stand with working families, take on big money? And that's what I hope to do in the next session.
But you guys didn't. But you guys didn't stand with working families. Listen, even when it comes to the railroad workers, you had Democrat senators that didn't even vote. You know that? I went over that on the show. There were Democrat senators that didn't even vote one way or the other. What are you going to do? You got another Democrat senator who did not support the sick leave, Joe Manchin. What are you going to do, Bernie? Now, Bernie Sanders, he's letting you know that he has a problem with the defense budget and that the Pentagon is corrupt. But I found out just a couple of minutes ago before I went live, Bernie Sanders caved again, not just to the MIC, but to Joe Biden. What am I talking about? Did you know Bernie Sanders was trying to bring forth some type of pressure to end the war in Yemen? He called for a resolution, which I agree with. It shouldn't be happening. End it. Stop it. People there are starving. People there are dying. And the U.S. government is complicit in that because the U.S. government gave Saudi Arabia the arms for Saudi Arabia to destroy people in Yemen. Something as simple as that is what he wanted to bring to the floor for a vote. Did that happen? No. Let me tell you why. Now, Ryan Graham, like I said, Ryan will be here at 9. Ryan was actually the one who tweeted this out. Let me show you what happened. Watch this. The White House is whipping against Bernie Sanders' Yemen war powers resolution, urging a no vote this evening. Sources involved tell me. Now he goes on to say here, Sanders called for a vote to be held Tuesday evening, that's tonight, December 13th. The White House, according to sources involved in the fight over the resolution, is urging senators to vote against the resolution. The White House is arguing that a vote in favor is unnecessary. Despite the lapse of ceasefire, significant hostilities have not yet resumed, and the vote will complicate diplomacy. When they say the White House, that means Joe Biden, just letting you know that. Let's go on. They are also arguing that Biden has made significant progress in reducing violence and reopening ports and airports, so his judgment should be respected and the resolution rejected. You guys see this, right? And finally, the White House has warned that some of the arguments being made could complicate the effort to back Ukraine in its war against Russia. In other words, we will continue to allow children to starve and die in Yemen. Let's go on. A White House spokesperson did not immediately respond to a request for comment. So there was that attempt to reach them there. Senator Chris Murphy, Democrat from Connecticut, chair of the Senate Foreign Relations Subcommittee with jurisdiction over U.S. support for the war, denounced the conflict in a series of statements posted online Thursday. So Bernie Sanders wanted to bring this to the floor for a vote, and he was urged by Joe Biden not to do so. And I say this, why would you come in and tell him not to even have the vote? What is he afraid of? Is Joe Biden afraid of the fact that the American people is going to be able to see who still wants to support that war in Yemen? That will start naming names? So I waited a bit to see if this was going to happen, this vote. Obviously, we know how Bernie would vote in this situation because he wants the resolution. And it's not just Bernie Sanders. Pramila Jayapal has also called for a resolution. Let me show you what happened. This is Ryan Grimm again. Dems caving to Biden pressure to vote no on Yemen WPR. Caving. Now he is retweeting Alex Schultz here. And he said, Ryan Grimm, who I know has been covering this Yemen resolution, Padilla is a no, and Feinstein's office isn't commenting, which doesn't bode well for her vote either. California senators falling in line with Biden. So Dave DeCamp tweeted, Bernie Sanders caves into White House pressure. There will be no vote on the Yemen War Powers resolution. What a coward. After he just had that interview on CNN complaining about the military budget, about the defense budget, complaining about the Pentagon. And just like that, he caved about any type of resolution. Caved. So how can you complain about the budget for the military industrial complex, but then you don't have the audacity to put an end to a conflict, or at least bring it to a vote to a conflict that the military industrial complex budget is supporting? Make it make sense. Make it make sense, people. By the way, you should check out Twitter in reference to this conflict because people are not happy with Bernie Sanders right now. Not happy. Now, here's the thing. I don't expect Joe Biden to be for this resolution. Don't expect it. But progressives do expect Bernie Sanders to be for the resolution and to bring it to the floor for a vote. Progressives expect Bernie Sanders to push back on the establishment Democrats, to push for peace. That's the problem. The problem that we have right now is that we have people like Bernie in DC, but they're not doing what they were supposed to do in reference to pushing back against the corporate Democrats at hand. This is more embarrassing. Do you get what I'm coming from? If Joe Biden did this, if it was Joe Biden says, Joe Biden says, no, I don't want to deal with this. No, don't do it. We expect that. But when you have Bernie Sanders choose not to bring it to the floor for a vote because he got that pressure from a corporate Democrat like Joe Biden, that's worse. I don't know what else to say at this point. I really don't. And I don't know how people at this point can continue to make excuses for them. I really do not. How are you going to say in that interview you just said you're going to push back, you're going to fight against big pharma, you're going to fight against the oligarchs, Why would I believe you when you can't even fight against the people in your own party? Because I still consider Bernie to be a Democrat. Why would I believe you? Why would I believe that you're going to push back against corporations? You're going to push back against big pharma. You can't even push back against Joe Biden. So why would I believe you? This is a big problem that we have. This is a big problem. Neo, thank you so much for the super chat. Important point here is that Biden is obviously scared of a primary challenge, and we should mobilize now. You can't wait for Bernie to wake up. Could you do a live react to Neo's algorithm on YouTube, Sabs? I can do that. I can't do it tonight, but I can do that at some point in the future. Thank you so much for that. JB says Bernie Sanders is a Democrat with an I next to his name. Lawrence, he should retire. He serves no purpose in the Senate. He talks and talks and then votes the Democratic Party line. Thank you for the super chat, Staccato. I often used to find myself wondering if they threatened Bernie's family after 2016 to tame him. Someone has to say it out loud. I asked Chris Hedges about this, and Chris Hedges said, and also Jesse Ventura said this as well, that Bernie Sanders had already decided when he announced he was running in 2016 that he was going to support Hillary Clinton if he lost. He had already made that decision. Now, I wish Bernie Sanders would have told the rest of us about that, because I would have kept my money in my pocket. Thank you for the super chat, Oz. Bernie sold us down the river so he wouldn't become the next Ralph Nader. He's not talking on Shewit. Just despicable. Retire, sheepdog. I think at this point he needs to retire too. Blue Moon says we're gonna blah blah and gonna blah blah. Who is we? We is you. Thank you for the super chat, Kyle. Bernie don't walk the walk. Sell out. Him and his good friend Joe. Synthetics. I guess they will have to write a strongly worded letter and apologize for it a day later. There's no coming back from this. Do you see it? Like, there's no coming back from this. Bernie Sanders, what do you tell the progressive base? What do you say to your followers right now? For the people who still believe in Bernie for some strange reason, what do you tell them? Thank you for the super chat, Black Freud. Hashtag Bernie, please retire. I agree. I agree. At this point, it's embarrassing. And people may say, oh no, we need to have him there. Do we at this point? If this is what he's going to do? At this point, not worth it. Not worth it.